Worst. The word worst is an adjective, an adverb, a noun, and a verb. The meaning of worst is an adjective. Meaning of the poorest quality or lowest standard, worse than any other person or thing of a similar kind. Example: it was by far the worst speech he had ever made. What's the worst thing that could happen? What she said confirmed my worst fears. Means proved they were right. Idiom with worst is adjective. Be your own worst enemy. Be your own worst enemy. To be the cause of your own problems. Come off. To be the cause of your own problems. Come off worst. Another idiom is come off worst. To lose a fight, competition, etc., or suffer more compared with others. Meaning of worst is adverb. Meaning most, barely, or seriously. For example, he was voted the worst dressed celebrity. Manufacturing industry was worst affected by the fuel shortage. Worst of all, I lost the watch my father had given me. Meaning of worst is a noun. The worst. Meaning the worst. The most serious or unpleasant thing that could happen. The part, situation, possibility, etc. that is worse than any other. For example, the worst of the storm was over. When they did not hear from her, they feared the worst. The worst of it is that I can't even be sure if they received my letter. He was always optimistic, even when things were at their worst. Idiom: at the worst or at worst. Meaning used for saying what is the worst thing that can happen at the very worst. For example, at the very worst, he'll have to pay a fine. Another idiom is bring out the worst in somebody. Meaning to make somebody show their worst qualities. Example: pressure can bring out the worst in people. Another idiom is do your worst. Do your worst. Meaning to do as much damage or be as unpleasant as possible. For example, let them do their worst. will fight them every inch of the way. Another idiom, get the worst of it, meaning to be defeated. Example, he'd been in a fight and had obviously got the worst of it. Another idiom, if the worst comes to the worst. Also, if worst comes to worst, meaning if the situation becomes too difficult or dangerous. If the situation becomes too difficult or dangerous. For example, if the worst comes to the worst, we'll just have to sell the house. Another idiom is the worst of all worlds, or the worst of all possible worlds, meaning all the disadvantages of every situation. Meaning of worst is a verb, meaning to defeat somebody in a fight or contest or an argument. Synonym of this verb is worst is get the better of.